Good day, everyone. Today we are going to talk about consolidating democracy as we build a nation. So, first of all, what is consolidating itself? So, it means strengthening the democracy as we build a nation after the martial law in 1985. And this includes the accomplishments after the EDSA revolution. First, it restored the old oligarchic patron-client relationship between the rich politicians and political families and the people at large, many of whom are poor and vulnerable. So as we all know na yung martial law, hindi siya kagaya ng mga traditional politics. So after the martial law, binalik nila, ni-restore nila yung old oligarchic o mga patron-client relationship, yung mga politiko na mayayaman, mga political families, just like yung halimbawa ni dito yung ama, governor, yung anak, vice governor, yung pamangkin, mayor, or congressman, parang ganun, yung political families, hierarchical na klaseng pamumuno. And not all the times you can consider these political families as rich politicians, but some of them are in the marginalized sector of the community and are vulnerable. So second is, they responded to the high cost of elections with big money politics amidst mass poverty, thus vote buying, pork barrel patronage, electoral fraud, and corruptions of elected appointed officials. So after the said event, the martial law, the government responded to the high cost of election, which means yung election dati, napakataas ng antas ng budgeting. Napakaraming perang nilalabas, pero napupunta ang iba nun sa vote buying. Bali, namimili sila ng boto. Pork barrel, yung mga scams na ginagawa ng mga elected or appointed officials ng gobyerno. If you don't know what pork barrel means, isang halimbawa na rito yung nakasangkutan ni Bong Revilla at Enrile. So amidst mass poverty, there is still the anomalies inside the government. Thus, electoral fraud is also considered na kasali doon. And corruption, of course, sa mga elected officials. So the third accomplishment after the EDSA revolution is they restored the old crony capitalism, albeit affecting the deregulation of power, banking, transportation, and communications, achieved a measure of development and lately significant fiscal and tax reforms and the highest economic growth in several years. 7.3% in gross national product in 2007 since 1986, built much more infrastructure than ever before, although much more needs to be done. Moreover, the tourist industry has developed significantly. However, given the nation's rapid population growth and compared to the economic progress gained by some Asian countries, the Philippines has a great deal to do in catching up with their own needs and advances of her neighbors. Although the Philippines have undergone so many issues, and that includes the martial law, napababa nito yung gross national product natin dahil sa pagkakagulong na gawa. Pero after nun, on that year, 1986, up to 2007, yung gross national product natin tumaas ng 7.3%. So, malaki-laki na rin yun. At kung ikukumpara natin yung progress na gain sa mga Asian countries, sa mga karatig bansa natin, Philippines is catching up with the advances of our neighbors, considering the fact that we are still developing countries. So we are developing our own nation and coping up with our own necessities as a country to provide for the people. The fourth one is continue the traditional politics and political parties focus on personalities rather than issues, policies, and reforms, with political dynasties dominating power in many places. So after the martial law, pinapatuloy nila yung traditional politics. So what is this traditional politics na ibig sabihin nito? So, yung mga political families na namumuno noon, binalik nila yon. At yung mga political parties na focus nila yung personalidad ng isang tao, hindi sa issues nila, hindi sa patakaran nila, at hindi sa reforma nila. In which I can say na nandito pa rin hanggang sa panahon ngayon. The fifth one is restore the old dysfunctional presidential form of government that is prone to gridlock, ineffective, and unaccountable for its corruption and failure in governance. The president, Congress, and the political parties are not accountable to the people, unlike in a more mature democracies. So the government saw that there is something wrong with the old dysfunctional presidential form of government na prone siya sa ineffective, unaccountable at corruption, including the failure in governance. So what they did is that binago nila yun. So the president, the Congress, and the political parties are not accountable to the people, unlike the more mature democracies. Next one is that they restored colonial unitary structure of national and local government relations that concentrates political power and resources in the national government, hampering local governance and prosperity of local communities by keeping them dependent on national government, patronage, and decision. So we have two different kinds of government. The first one is the federal government and the second one is the unitarian government. This unitarian government, ito yung colonial na na-adapt natin mula sa mga Amerikano. So they are making the communities by keeping them dependent in the national government patronage and even in the decisions. So lahat ng ginagawa ng nasa local government kailangan ng approval sa national government. At yung resources and power nakakonsentrate dun sa national government. So they're hampering local governments and prosperity of the local communities. They also made the Supreme Court perhaps too powerful in relation to the executive and legislative departments by empowering the former to determine whether or not there has been a grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack of excess of jurisdiction on the part of any branch of instrumentality of the government. 1987 Philippines Constitution, Article 8, Section 1. This was adopted as a reaction to the abuses of power during the Marcos dictatorship. What checked there in the Supreme Court if it commits a grave abuse of discretion? So after the martial law, pinalakas nila yung kapangyarihan ng Supreme Court na in relation to the executive and the legislative department para malaman nila kung nakagawa ba or hindi ng grave abuse or discretion ang isang branch ng gobyerno, halimbawa na lamang sa executive or sa presidente. So the Supreme Court has the right na imbestigahan kung may ginagawa bang anomalya ang isang branch ng government. Next is they established the ARMM or what we know as the Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao and concluded the peace accord with the Moro National Liberation Front in 1996. But just and lasting peace and accommodation of the legitimate aspirations of the Moro peoples now led by the Moro Islamic Liberation Front or MILF has yet to be achieved. So after the martial law, itinayo nila yung ARMM. These places are mostly located here in Mindanao and they concluded a peace accord with the MNLF na naging MILF na sa panahon ngayon. They are considered the friend of the government. Bali nakipag-alyansa sila sa gobyerno. This group contains Moro people na naghahanga din ng kapayapaan. Ninth is they inherited the corrupted politics, political culture, and bureaucracy, and weakened the judiciary under the Marcos dictatorship. In the absence of the adequate salaries and public accountability of officials and of accountable political parties that assume responsibility for failure of governance. So after the martial law, we cannot say that all accomplishments are good, but some of it was bad, and this is a part of it. The Filipino people inherited the corrupted politics. Kumbaga, kung ano yung nasa dati, kung ano yung ginagawa ng mga officials natin dati, that is what we adopt from until today's generation. Even yung bureaucracy, yung political culture, yung pamumuno ng gobyerno, kung paano sila mag-handle ng tao. At napahina rin nila yung judiciary power under the Marcos dictatorship. And that is what we get. That is what we inherited. And it is also because of the absence of adequate salaries. Kumbaga, hindi sapat yung sweldo nila. We also inherited the politicized military or police as a partner in civil governance, sharing in exercise of political power. As we all notice, meron talagang mga police or mga militar na may pinapaligan silang politiko. And this is what we also inherited from the past government system. And one example of this is the Macapagal Arroyo administration tends to militarize the exercise of civilian authority and threaten human rights in emerging liberal democracy. Ideally, what is needed is a professional military police at all times subordinate to civilian authority instead of being self-serving interventionists. Nemenso believes that given the situation now, it is only the military that can neutralize the elite. Next is that they encourage a large and vibrant civil society. Some of those non-government organizations have become highly politicized, a force for representation, change, and reform as well as for selfish interest and partisanship. So, even the non-government organizations have been politicized as well. Although this kind of organizations should not be involved in politics. And they use it for their self-interest and also to encourage individuals to support a person. For example, the black and white movement of the NGOs and various religious organizations actively sought the ouster of the Macapagal Arroyo presidency. With one voice of mostly Catholic leaders, the black and white movement joined the political opposition in blocking the proposed amendments of the 1987 Constitution. Thus, arguably, those civil society organizations helped to maintain the political status quo and its deliberating effects on governance and the people's welfare. The justification for their opposition to charter change was their deep distrust of the president and their suspicion that she intended to extend her rule beyond the constitutional limit. The 12 accomplishment after the EDSA revolution is having removed President Marcos in 1986 by the people power in 2001, we again employed people power to remove the erring President Joseph Estrada immediately following his aborted impeachment trial by the Senate. This was our second extra constitutional removal of sitting president, although legitimized by the Supreme Court and by public opinion expressed in the surveys. These acts caused political instability. So, as we all know that President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was the one who led the martial law and has been impeached or removed as a president after the EDSA revolution. And in 2001, they again employed the people power during the Estrada's administration. He was removed through impeachment trial by the Senate. And this is the second time that they had removed a president through impeachment trial. This is legitimized, so it is approved by the Supreme Court, which they also base in the public opinion expressed in the surveys. Bale, kinukuha nila yung opinion ng mga tao kung ano naranasan nila. Kaya, inaprubahan niya ng Supreme Court na i-impeach yung dalawang presidente na yun. They restored the pre-martial law free press and media with a vengeance as a force for democratization, public participation, and accountability and reform, and also for promoting the self-interest of their practitioners, owners, political allies. Like other institutions, some of their practitioners suffer from corruption and lack of responsibility and accountability. Before martial law, the press has its freedom of expression. But during the martial law, anything the press will say that is against the Marcos administration will be in danger. So anything that they say will be considered as rebellion, especially if it is against the government. And after the martial law, they restored the freedom of the press and the freedom of expression. It is not just But they also urge the cry for democracy, the participation of the public, and accountability of the government. They also enlarge the political role of religion through the Catholic bishop, priests, and nuns, Protestant leaders, Christian evangelicals. Another is that they continue dependency in foreign loans and aid rather than on more self-reliant development and resource mobilization. We all know about the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, that is source of money from a developing country when they wanted to loan some huge amounts to develop their own country. And because of that, after the EDSA revolution, we continue depending on them rather than using our own sources to mobilize and to help our country develop. They also failed to put closure to the plunder and corruption, human rights violation, and the injustices of the Marcos regime and succeeding administration. So President Macapagal Arroyo detained former President Estrada in a hurry after his conviction for plunder in a trial that took over 6 years in the name of national reconciliation or for political expediency. A perceived culture and impunity adds to the conventional wisdom and cynicism that in the Philippines, corruption and lawlessness pay. They induce and encourage the massive migration of Filipino workers and families all over the world in search for higher paying jobs. This has resulted in substantial foreign currency remittances as well as heavy social costs to our migrants and their families. It is also expanding the global Filipino nation, some of whose concerned overseas Filipino, including dual citizens, are seeking an active role in promoting reforms and good governance in the homeland. So dito natin ipapasok yung mga OFW. So they induce or encourage the massive migration, bali yung pangingibang bansa ng mga tao. Kasi yung pangingibang bansa nila, they are helping the economy. Lastly, they failed largely despite some development and progress in 22 years to solve our chronic problems of poverty, social inequality, corruption, unemployment, injustice, lawlessness, violence, communist and moral rebellions, inadequate public services, and environmental degradation, rapid population growth, lack